Thanks for joining. Really lovely to see you all. So my name's Jade. I work for the Real Farming Trust. I work on a project called Ready Healthy Eat, which is quite a large UK-wide project, and it's concerned with doing the very best possible ready meals for people experiencing food poverty. We're lucky two of the partners are here from that project. Vic and Sophie, they'll introduce themselves later on. The other two projects are called Now in Belfast, who work with adults with learning difficulties, and the Sirenes in Scotland, who deal with people facing homelessness. So the project's about making sure that people experiencing food poverty in those four areas are really eating the best possible quality ready meals. And the fifth partner is Call from Coventry University, who have helped us research the social impact of that work. And so some of what we've got to say today has come out of that research. So what we want to talk about here today, and together really, I think we want to hear from everybody who's on the call as well as the main speakers. We want to think about what's in the gap between, on one end of the scale, people who are doing really fantastic quality farming, really getting into agroecology, producing brilliant quality food, which is eaten by people who can afford it, who belong to a particular social group. And right on the other end of the scale, people who are doing a great job addressing food poverty and giving out custard creams. And there's, I guess all of us are somewhere along that scale, but most of us are nearer one edge or the other edge. And the four speakers we've got today are unusual in a way in that they're more towards the middle of it. It's a bit of a chasm. There's quite a gap in the middle of that, and some quite awkward issues. I mean, there's some practical issues about finance and fridges, but there's also some quite challenging social issues. There's shame, there's some quite awkward issues, there's class. And this session really wants to think about all of that, what's in that gap, and what actions we need to begin to take to address that gap and do a better job of it. So the other two speakers we've got today are farms, which is really great. So there's two CSAs here. Do you want to give us a wave, and we'll hear from you in a minute. And Suzy, would you like to say hello? Suzy's helped organise this session. Unmute yourself, Suzy, and say hello and tell us your role too.
Hi, I'm Suzy Russell, a coordinator of the Community Supported Agriculture Network UK. So we're embarking on some work to look at how our CSAs can make their food more, or their produce more accessible, basically. So this is a really exciting session for us. Thanks, Jade.
Yeah, it's great to be working with Suzy. So we're probably not going to have a lot of time for questions. I mean, we will if we can, but we're expecting to be able to go on at 5 o'clock in a chat room where there'll be more time for actual dialogue. So if you want to carry on at the end at 5 o'clock, we'll finish here. And I've put where we're going to be right at the top of the chat. You'll find where we're going to go at 5 o'clock, so you can scroll right up. So if you want to carry on at 5 o'clock, go to Hoover, Community, and then go to meetups and put food poverty in the search bar, and we can carry on chatting there if you've got questions at the end. And my email is on that first slide. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. So if you've got questions or want to contact the speakers afterwards, you'll be able to do that. All right. I'm just going to show you a few statistics that maybe not new for you, but I thought they'd be a good place to start. Right, so I'll not read them out. I'll let you scan through them for yourselves. Okay, so I noticed there was a discussion group set up in the conference, which was about how we improve access to agroecological food. But if you're one of the people on those slides, which is actually a lot of us, the question isn't about how to access agroecological food, it's about how to access food. And the statistics show us, and perhaps it's not news, that the issue is really widespread, that wherever you are, there's probably people not far away from you who are struggling to pay for food at all. Yeah, so and it's on the rise, as you probably know. It's commonplace almost. All right, I'm going to show you another slide now. Here we are, and it speaks for itself, really. Can you see that all right?
You need to share your screen again, Jade.
Sorry. There we go. All right, so in the chat, I'd like you to, everybody, to put, if you've got a feeling response to that picture, the difference between the food bag on the left and the food box on the right, if you've got a feeling response to that image, I'd like to put it in the chat. Yeah, there's some great answers in there. Okay, yeah, all right, thanks. And now I'd like you to put in the chat why you think that there's such a difference between those two images. What's the cause? And after that, we'll get the panel to answer the same question. But first, if you could put your own response in the chat, why you think that difference exists. But that's quite interesting. I hope you have a chance to scroll through it, everybody. All right, so I think we'll go on to the speakers now. So if you, I don't mind which order you go in. If you just introduce yourself when you're ready to start, and tell us your interpretation of why there's a difference in those two images. Does anybody want to go first? All right, Graham and Amy, you're on. Tell us why you think there's that difference. Thanks.
Hey everyone. So yeah, we've been having a chat about this before the session. Firstly, I just wanted to say it's really good that Oxford Real Farming Conference is talking about this, because as farmers, we're very focused on obviously the food in the good box there, and you go past the supermarket baskets and you see this, but we have a community set up that is giving access to this kind of food. That's given access to really good healthy food. So the big difference for me is actually accessibility and connection, and the health benefits of eating really good food lead to that well-being, that leads to more freedom, that leads to more social connection, more cohesion, and it's a step up in healthiness. Whereas the products versus ingredients seem to perpetuate the very same system of food poverty. So there's a lot of calories within that, and there's enough calories in the world for everybody, but the sort of hidden hunger that is inherent in that, that share of products is something that really strikes me.
Yeah, I also wanted to pick up on someone in the chat said like power and lack of power. And a lot of the things that excites me about small scale farming, both in the urban setting and in the rural setting, is the giving access to the skills and the chance to know where your food comes from, be hands-on, and that in itself being a feeling of power and confidence. And we were talking about, do we think that we work in food poverty alleviation, and I guess this conversation's really made us think like actually we spend so much that's the opposite of what we're working in. We're working in the connectivity and the community and the education and skills. And
food sovereignty.
Yeah.
And that veg box speaks of food sovereignty, and the energy goes towards food sovereignty, whereas the other, it goes towards something that feeds the same problem and the poverty that we're speaking about.
Yeah, this degenerative
farming, yeah.
Degenerative farming, the other conference. So on that note, we'll hand it over to the other group.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. So we're John and Rosie from Blackgrove Green CSA, and as small scale producers as well, I'm agreeing what Graham and Amy were saying, and also we can't afford to be able to give away what we grow for free, because we rely on the kind of fixed income of a regular box scheme. But when we do have excess and we've tried to give it to people who need it, what we've found is that it's quite difficult, because I know all food banks are different, but our local food bank is only open 1 day a week, and they don't have refrigeration. So they don't take fresh produce. They have taken eggs from us once, but on top of that, we don't really have great refrigeration to be able, we're quite small scale, so we'll harvest stuff and then, you know, deliver it straight away. And we don't have the time to reach out and find the people who really need this food, and to arrange for us to deliver it to them on a kind of random basis, or even kind of to arrange for them to pick it up. So it is about the kind of infrastructure in between the farms and the people that need it.
I agree.
Yes, I'll pass that on to someone else.
Okay, so Vic and Sophie both work on projects that are first about food poverty in the sort of urban projects. So it'd be interesting to hear something on the other side of the picture from them.
I'm going to go first, Sophie. Hi, everybody. I'm Vic. I work for an organisation called the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. So we are a city-based organisation that brings together lots of community activity around food, and that is growing, that is food banks, that is meal projects. It's all sorts of, we have a kitchen. I'm really watching all the comments coming through on the chat, because it's really interesting as people's discussions going. But I guess Jade asked for our reaction to it. And I tell you what, it makes me really angry. It makes me really upset when I look at that picture and I say that based on circumstance of how you were born or things that have happened to you in your life, that actually that might be your food choice, and that actually it's that there's so many people who because, you know, we talk about food poverty, fuel poverty, uniform poverty. I saw bed poverty the other day. All of them are actually about not having enough income to be able to afford to make healthy choices. So I think that we can look at some really good solutions, and I'm going to talk later as our other people about some of the ideas we're doing. But ultimately, you have to remember this is about really big a situation where we're in a really, really rich nation, and yet probably 20% of people don't have enough income to cover their basic living costs and have to make impossible choices. So it makes me really angry and upset, is the answer, Jade.
Yeah, similar to Jade and to Vic. So I'm Sophie. I'm from the Hornbeam Centre in Walthamstow in London. We're just a small community environment centre. We work on small local projects that promote low cost living and have a low impact on the environment. And I guess these images just really for me were examples of how there are two different food systems, and that it's really unfair that, you know, essentially people who are experiencing food poverty because they don't have enough income are forced into situations where they're, you know, having to make choices around, well, what kind of food do they get, and it's about what's affordable to them. And, you know, I think it's worth remembering that the people who have low income or who are from low income households, they do want access to, you know, good, healthy, nutritious food, you know, organic food from local producers. So it's about how do we bridge that gap, and for me it's about a kind of a big system change, food system change, as well as the like trying to address the root causes of food poverty. So it's no small task. But you know, all we can do is on a very local level just try to figure out the practicalities of how we can make that happen.
Yeah, what strikes me when I hear either farms or urban groups who are really making a good job of this work talk about these issues is actually they're saying very similar things, despite coming from quite different kinds of projects sometimes. All right, so given that food poverty is widespread and there are some, you know, pretty shocking policy issues that have caused that, I'm guessing most people are working in organisations that have got something to do with food, and a number of them will be farms. I want you to have a look down the bottom. If you hover your mouse down the bottom, you'll have reactions come up. And I want you to answer the question with a thumbs up. I might be able to demonstrate. Here we are, look. That's a yes. And that's a not sure. We haven't got a thumbs down option. Oh, we might have, do we? No, I don't think we do. So we'll have that as a no. Okay, that's no. That's maybe. And that's yes. And the question is it your organisation's job to be addressing food poverty? There's a few people not responding. I wonder if they're still there. They've gone off for a cup of tea. But they're not quite sure how to respond. Oh, yeah. So a lot of people are feeling like it's their responsibility. Oh, what's happened? My screen's gone completely wonky. I can't see you. Something disastrous has just happened to my screen here. Oh, there we go. That's better. Okay, so maybe it's a bit controversial that there are perhaps farms and other food projects doing a brilliant environmental job of getting on with their food work, and food poverty isn't yet on their agenda. And I think it's debatable whether it should be, but it's present, it's around. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is to go into breakout rooms. So I think we're all back. I dropped in on a few of the sessions and they were really interesting and really, really good conversations. So I'm going to ask everyone to just bring one thing back. I think probably it'd be more valuable if we don't try and give an overview of everything your group said, but just to bring back one nugget each. And you've only got a sentence, you won't have very long. Does anyone want to go for, maybe we should start with group one. Group one, can you bring us one sentence? I can't hear anyone. Is someone speaking with it? And still...
I think that was us. Yes, I'm Charlotte from Camel CSA Group 1. Yeah, the nugget I'm bringing back is the nugget that came up at the very beginning, and it came from someone who's representing Locavore in Glasgow, and he pointed out that food that doesn't degrade the land, doesn't degrade the people who are producing it, is actually not necessarily cheap enough for a lot of people to afford.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thanks for looking after the group. That's really great. So group two, can you bring us a different nugget?
I can report back on group two. Yeah, I mean, logistics and infrastructure for redistribution came up. And also the idea that when you're sort of providing activities or outreach to communities, that the one thing is that actually somebody said something around that you know, charging a little bit for the session. People actually wanted to be charged a little bit for the session, that they sort of didn't want the charity. And the other point was about actually going to people where they are and you know, running activities and outreach where people are rather than expecting them to come to you.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. Okay, group three, just one thing and a different thing, if there is anything different from your group.
I'll report back for group three. So also identifying the systemic issues and the kind of more practical logistical issues. And one of them being, Becca mentioned, how to link food growers who might have a surplus of produce at some point to, you know, where those food poverty projects are, without having the time or the capacity to reach out and do that work themselves. So really just trying to find ways of linking, I guess, food growers to food poverty projects.
Yeah, well, we've seen them working well. It's very often a partnership between a food poverty project and a grower, each doing their bit well. Group four, one thing that we haven't already heard.
We're really interested in the dignity side of it and how bringing together people who eat food regardless of what kind of a pay band they're in would be better served in the same place. So there's not a stigmatized food bank versus other food outlet. So bringing those things together, I think, is the most important nugget that we got out of our group. And
with that, people were very excited to create like a whole community feel that felt inclusive. Like lots of the conversation was about connection. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, group 5, I think we're on.
I think that's going to be me. I think it was a really rich discussion, but an exchange of experience. The one I've got the big star next to is just pointing out that there's lots of food workers who can't afford to eat the food they're growing, and that actually the poverty we're talking about isn't just food poverty. The poverty we're talking about is spreading out so far around society now that it's everywhere, and we've all got responsibility to face it. It's not just siloed.
Yes, thank you. Okay, group 6, I think we've got to. Going on from group 6?
I think that's us. One of the things that came out of our group was about food prep. Just quite a few people were saying about, well, it was about, you know, if somebody might have some disabilities who was receiving a kind of food parcel or ill health, it's about the time and the skills that are needed, even like knife skills and things like that, to be able to prepare fresh produce. And then there was also somebody who was helping people to learn how to grow fresh stuff in their gardens or balconies. And he was saying about, you know, if you the knowledge and the skills about people learning about, say, things like microgreens and sprouts, about how easy that is. And it's kind of yeah, like a big skills gap. And someone's also saying about how it's not sometimes people do just need to have a tin of vegetables and some comfort food or some treats involved in that box. It's, you know, it's got to be a kind of compromise.
All right, so after this we're going to hear from each of the speakers just one thing that they're doing to try and bridge the gap, one practical thing. And I've posted something in the chat. I'll post it again so you can find it. I've written a sheet of models that mainly CSAs are using to try and sort out how to pay for good quality food reaching food poverty projects. So it includes things like a sliding scale or pay it forward or work shares. It includes things like spreading payments to make it more accessible for people who can't pay a month up front, and engaging people in the whole community work of the farm and so on. So there's a list of different models about what you can do to actually make it work in this sheet that I've written, which I'm going to post in the chat. And now each of the speakers, I think, are going to tell us one thing that they're doing, a sort of illustration from their project. Anyone want to go first? We've got to keep to time, everyone. It's getting a bit a bit tight for time. Keep it brief. Okay, Graham, you're on first. Thank you.
Okay, so this year we took on an exciting project to grow beans, and it's funny because we were talking about making it accessible, but we're looking at beans that are like the beans that you'd get in baked beans, the haricot beans, and it's a bit of UK history. We're growing these beans that are normally grown in America, and then yet they become in a tin, they become you know, English, you know, the great British baked bean, but they're all grown in America. We are growing them on a 3-acre site. We just did our first harvest and threshing with children from a nearby school. It turns out 7-year-olds are perfect height to harvest these beans. They just pick them up, put them in their coat, they're dead excited, and we feed them a meal of baked beans that we made our own recipe using squash and tomatoes and onions from our site. Yeah, it's great. It hopefully is just doing that bit of showing that comfortable, delicious, emotional, connecting food is accessible. It's an extremely affordable meal, and growing it in the UK will only be more affordable. So that's what we've been doing.
That's absolutely brilliant. I love that. Thank you so much. Vic, do you want to go?
I can do, and while I'm talking, I'm actually going to share my screen because I have a very quick little diagram I want to share with you. It's a thumbs up. Can you see that? Thank you. So basically, I'm just going to talk to you about something which we call the affordable food projects. In other parts of the country, they're called pantries or food clubs, and it's trying to actually address the issue that came up really clearly in our group about the fact that actually food banks have stepped into a space which is about emergency. Only lots of people are relying on them week in and week out. It is not a go 3 times and, you know, your situation is solved. So the idea behind the food clubs is people pay a small membership fee, and the food that comes into them is both surplus food. So we also have all the crisps and things that we have to deal with that my friend from Wakefield was mentioning in the chat earlier, but also it has produce that comes from local farms and also from local businesses. The idea of the membership scheme is that it very much keeps community wealth within. So you pay like £3.50, £5.50, £8.50, depending on the size of the bag, depending on how much you can afford. But the money then gets recycled, so you can then spend that money locally. Right. For us, the big question on this, we've got 10 of these across the city at the moment, is the logistics of getting the fresh produce to the projects. And this is where an organisation called the Brighton Food Factory have been working with us. They themselves are a social enterprise that, you know, trying to make a model work of having a restaurant business, but also having the low cost food to the affordable food schemes. In my 3 minutes that Jade's given me, I can't do justice to this whole model, but I guess what I'm trying to say is one of the things we're trying to do is trying to show how it can be different. It's like, you know, we've got to take on the giants here if we're looking at a food system. And actually the way you sometimes do that is actually by proving things work at a very local level. When I say local, I mean either a neighborhood or I mean like a sort of bigger community, but then by working together. The thing I've loved today is actually hearing all the different perspectives, and it's actually a conversation with the CSAs and the food poverty organisations like mine. We have to keep this going, right? Because between us, I think we can make some really good stuff happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. Yeah, I think we need a lot more time to talk about this. There's a lot more to say about that. Sophie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll be quick. So we're trialing a few different ways of, you know, trying to address food poverty with quality food. And one of them is through a community cafe, which we run collectively with a group called the Gleaners. And the cafe does use surplus food, which comes from supermarkets, local grocers, but also local allotment holders and, you know, from food growers who are close enough to us. And they take this food and which sometimes has a short shelf life because it's surplus, and they turn it into tasty vegan meals, which we then serve and sell at the cafe on a sliding scale, so making it really accessible and affordable to everyone. And a sliding scale is where we use different price points, which are offered based on the customer's ability to pay. So for example, £2 for unwaged people, £5 for waged, and a £10 solidarity rate. It's worth noting that people will obviously self-identify to a sliding scale, and there's no means testing. Our cafe used to be run as a pay what you feel model instead of a sliding scale, and this is where people could pay whatever they could afford and what they felt the food was worth. But that kind of left it a bit broad, and people found it a bit uncomfortable, not having a clue what to pay. So we've moved to a sliding scale. The ingredients themselves are fresh surplus produce donated to us, so it doesn't cost us anything, and in fact it saves that food from being wasted. So it brings into, you know, this whole food waste issue into the forefront. We bulk buy staples from food cooperatives or ethical suppliers as much as possible. The cafe is mostly funded by grants at the moment due to the pandemic. We did a lot of emergency food provision, but we hope that in the next year it'll become a bit more financially self-sufficient. And yeah, the Gleaners like community cafe is just a public social eating space, and it's an example of it being on a really local level, how you can create an alternative food system and trying to, you know, really give people a dignified way of obtaining healthy, nutritious food at a very low cost. And, you know, it might not solve the root cause of food poverty, but it does, yeah, provide an example of solidarity on a very local level, which is what we should all be trying to do.
Thank you, Sophie. You said a lot in a short time there. Thank you so much. Okay, John and Rosie.
So what we do on the farm is that we do volunteer days, and they're open to vulnerable people, and we employ a therapeutic gardener. And so the people that come might be having a bad time in their lives, like with mental ill health, or they might have had some unemployment. So it's kind of open to people who could be experiencing food poverty. And we all work together, and then at lunch we all sit and we eat a meal, a big healthy meal together, and we make a big soup, a big vegan soup with like lentils and fresh produce from the garden, and we kind of cook all together. And it's like, and then at the end of the day, the volunteers can take home produce from the garden as a kind of thank you. And it's people that come, we're rural, but we're on a bus route. And so some of the people who come don't have cars, they can get the bus there. So it's kind of, it's sort of thinking about that it's not just about food poverty, it's not just about affording good food. It's about having the skills and the knowledge to make fresh produce into like a healthy meal. And it's about emotions as well, and about the emotions around nourishing ourselves. And we feel that like, do we deserve that? Like, do we deserve to nourish ourselves? And it's about self-worth and a shame. And also about, do you feel relaxed and safe enough to when you eat food? And it's about kind of making food into like a positive experience, whether you're living on your own or whether you're like with a family with young children. It's like making the whole thing into a positive experience. So it's about belonging and sharing and about community. And we we just make it with like lentils, and we put the soup with lentils, and we put a lot of coconut in and a lot of vegetables, so people who come might not have been able to pack their own lunch, so they can still come and have the whole day out and be full up. So we make it every single time, and it's always there. And the way that we pay for that is it's subsidised, because we got grant funding from Awards for All, the National Lottery, who gave us a pot of money. It was £10,000, and it helps to employ the grower and the volunteer coordinator and the therapeutic gardener just part-time to actually run the project, and helps to subsidise if we're buying in, you know, some food. But we do keep it like quite cheap, so it's affordable. And then we also did crowdfunding, and it got match funded, because we're meeting the targets of our local council, which is improving people's mental, physical health, building community and reducing social isolation.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. So we're going to get cut off, I think, at 5 o'clock. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I really hope it carries on past 5 o'clock. I don't think we've hardly started yet, have we? So if you want to carry on chatting when we get cut off at 5 o'clock, then you need to go to Hoover, and then go to community, and then go to meetup, and then type in food poverty, and then we'll be able to carry on chatting there.
What could go wrong, Jade? What could go wrong?
I'm really hoping to see at least 2 of you make that difficult journey.
I reckon if we can do that, we can do anything.
I know, we save the planet if we can do that. All right, so that document I put in the chat, if you want to keep it, you better nab it, I think, and download it onto your computers. Laura, can you tell us whether we'll be able to read the chat after the meeting? Can you unmute yourself and let us know? Is the chat going to get lost?
Unfortunately, I think the chat will get lost, but I can surely save it.
If you can try and catch it, that'll be great, because of course I didn't get time to read it, and I think there was some great stuff.
Thing. I'll do my best to do that.
See if it's possible. Thank you. All right, so we've got 5 minutes for some rounding off. I think we'll ask for one sentence just to forewarn you speakers. If you're primarily a food poverty project, I'm going to ask you what it is that farmers ought to be doing. And vice versa, if you're a farming project and one of the speakers, I'm going to ask you what food banks ought to be doing. Before that, I'm going to put Joy on the spot, because I think Joy's the best listener I've ever met in my whole life. So Joy's got the tricky job, rather unwelcome job, I think, giving a concluding remark of what needs to happen next, or what struck her about what we've had today. You haven't got very long, Joy, just a minute or something.
Thanks, Joy.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's a very mean task to give me. Right. I think I'm very struck by the incredible depth and breadth of expertise in this room, you know, from with so many creative solutions, from the simplest things to the complex system stuff that Vic described. And we really need to value ourselves. It's like, and I know this sounds a little bit trite, but the word love was coming through to me, because if we don't really care, if we don't really have that human connection, then we can't make the change. And I've heard so many voices really speaking from that place of I don't know, deep connection, deep humanity. So I just wanted to say that because that's the number one, isn't it? That's the number one building block. And then the other thing that maybe I wanted to comment on is, because it's complex and because there are so many different angles, there isn't any one size fits all. We know we need to get away from food banks and create longer term change, but there are so many things again. So there's been this, a few people asking in chat, you know, and I was just saying, could we have more shared voice? So perhaps that's something that could come out of this. Perhaps it's something that could be picked up in the conversation later. I think Beth Bell has from Food Ethics Council has questioned, said she'd be interested. Luke might be interested, but I think something more shared voice at a national level is still really missing, and that was what comes across. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but that's what I heard. And I just wanted to say deep respect to all of you. I mean, amazing, amazing work going on. Thanks, Jade, for the opportunity to comment.
Did a brilliant job, Joy. I knew you would. Thank you very much. Okay, so the 4 speakers, you've got really only half a minute. If you are one of the food poverty projects, what do farmers need to do? And if you're one of the farmers, what do food poverty projects need to do? Any order, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. I think if I'm speaking to the farmers, and it'll be the same for us, I'm sure, it's just reach out to some local food poverty projects and get the conversation and build those networks. They are connected. You just need to make that one connection, and then you'll have a way to redirect food.
That's such a lovely sentiment, Sophie, because we were just talking about how the food bank, which I called the poverty administration system, and it's kind of like, that's the old school food bank, which is like impenetrable for our food to get there. But now there's just like this beautiful infrastructure arising from projects like yours, and my mum actually used to run a food waste cafe, and it's these intermediaries that are generally on the ground and weaving people, and the people that work for them are a diversity of people. It's not just a division of who's serving who and who needs who. It's like we're working together to solve many problems holistically.
Community pantry.
We're just about out of time, I think. And we haven't had the closing remarks. Laura, have we got time for the closing remarks from the other two? Do we need to cut off straight away?
Actually, we do have to cut off
quite
straight away, but I guess 2 more minutes we could give.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you again where we're moving to, which is Hoover, and then community, and then meetups, and then you can search for food poverty. If any of the speakers want to give their closing remark, better get in there quickly.
I'll have a closing remark, which is I think we need to keep talking, because actually what's come out of this is like the most exciting nugget of tiny seed. It's like I'm gonna part that loaf of bread that somebody was talking about earlier. It's like, really, it feels like that for me is my final thought with this.
Okay, I'm going to say thank you very much to everyone who's contributed, which is actually a lot of people who've actually put quite a lot of work in making the session come together. So thank you, and thanks to Suzy for doing it with us. And we really want to see everyone at Hoover, community, meetup, food poverty, so we can carry on chatting a bit longer. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for doing the tacky bit for us. We needed you.